Hello everyone, welcome to Farming Simulator 15. Whoops, I am off my course. That wasn't good. Probably ought to back up and try that again. But anyway, welcome to Gelvin Valley, created by, I almost said the wrong name, Wild Wes. We are on Farming Simulator 15, of course, and still enjoying this wonderful map even after so many episodes. We are in the middle of planting field number 22, of course, and causing damage to this tractor. You know, maybe I should swing wide when I go around here and then come back down the hill. You know what? Maybe I'll give that a try. That way I don't have to swing so tight, just kind of turning around each end. Well, in the last episode, we boosted our sheep herd by, let's see, 150, or excuse me, no, more than that, 554 animals. We're up to 600 sheep. So I have many hopes and dreams that their wool will take us out of financial poverty. Of course, we had to incur a whole bunch of debt in order to do it. But that's alright. Hopefully, I think it's a 30-day loan, so we should have a long period of time here that we have to pay it back. Although, like I observed last time, I think the loan neglected to give me $100,000, at least by my calculations, so once we have a break in the action here, I'm going to go down to the bank and have a friendly chat with my loan officer. I'm sure he will understand when we have a visit. That just isn't neighborly to not give the whole amount. Alright, yeah, I think this is a little bit easier to turn. So with the loan and money, we bought some more real estate, 4 more fields. I tried to get those that had a little bit of a land block and was the most economical. It's a little bit hard to determine, you know, just what kind of a deal you're getting. I seem to recall on that there were tools out there where you could use them to kind of help you determine how many acres or hectares a particular land area was. And maybe I need to find those tools. Maybe I would find out that my purchasing decisions were all based on the wrong thing. I do know that Wes has said in the documentation for his map that he started the player with some of the worst fields in the map. I mean, they're tiny, there's many of them, they're on insane slopes, and the best land, you know, is simply going to cost more. And so, I mean, I think that's kind of a cool thing that he put into the map, you know, to do it that way. So there is some differences in property value just based on that. Kind of how nasty the field is, and the worse that it is, the lower the price. Now, we then come in, but I guess I don't have a tool or way to gauge other than just using my eyes to kind of see which bit of real estate is the best deal. And which is important, you know, when our capital is so limited. And I've tried to focus on fields, no matter how steep and nasty they are, you know, to just work on the most land for the least price. And you know, in real life, I think you can sometimes get a higher yield on a slope, because I seem to recall they measure acres or land area on a flat plane. So if you have an extended slope, you know, you may have actually more acres there than would meet the eye, or that would be actual published. But anyway, we're going to have some more field work to do. I got to rent. Once I get done planting, I need to go take care of those fields. They're going to need to be ripped. There's going to be rocks. You know, then I'm going to need to cultivate them or smooth them out somehow. So I've got a lot of tractor work this fall to try to get all that done. Plus I have all these fields are going to need to be fertilized. So yeah, lots of farming to do, and I am happy to do it. Last episode, after getting through all my excuses on why I'm incurring more debt and making my financial situation even tougher, I went back to talking about summer jobs, and the one that I was at before Lone Oak, was a strawberry farm. They had some apricots, eventually turned into a sod and nursery farm, although that was kind of right on the cusp of when I left to go work at Lone Oak Farms. That they were turning into, or starting a focus in sod and nursery, which is basically where they've been ever since. But I got in on some of the earliest parts of it. I've been back, helped with a little bit of that farming with him, but my brother did farm more, as he ended up staying there after I left. And so last episode, I was talking about some of the other things that we did outside of harvest season, namely a whole bunch of weeding. And now I think the farmers would hire big groups of individuals to come in to handle that, if there's a need for weed control by hand. And in Farming Sim here, we just don't have that. I know in some of the later versions of Farming Sim, to kind of depict more organic farming, they had the weeder unit. I think in Farm Sim 19, maybe it was there in 17, I don't recall, but in 17 it probably didn't do anything, because 19 is where they actually had weeds show up as something for us to deal with on the farm. So you might have had the weeder in 17, but it didn't really, probably what it did was added a layer of fertilization, but I don't recall exactly. So they have that, but in real life, I've never used a weeder. We never had one on the farm, and I don't think it would have worked. There's certain crops where, if you got enough foliage and it's tall enough, you don't have much choice but to get out there on your hands and knees and pull weeds the old-fashioned way. And so that's kind of what we had to do. So maybe those weeders are used more for, well, I don't know, for shorter crops. I guess I just don't know much about them. I'd be curious if anybody's ever used them, as to how effective they are. Is it just a band-aid? Does it do a good job? Of course, in game, it did a great job pulling the weeds out. I just don't know how well they work in real life. So, alright, we're mowing down this field, getting her done, kind of on the downhill slide. Did that plant everything? Yeah, I think it did. Just wonder, I got this GPS set up. Hopefully it's getting most of it. It's just a little bit harder to see where you're going when you're direct seeding over the top of what you had. So I remember long days, we'd be out under the sun, my brother and I, maybe sometimes some other, maybe cousins, friends from church or whatever, out in the fields. And last time I know, I kind of talked about that. I think it was out of the goodness of his heart that, my uncle was willing to have a bunch of preteens out there, knowing full well what kind of a job he was going to get. And don't get me wrong, if we didn't do it right, we were chewed out, sent back out, some of those kinds of things, but I think he understood what he was getting, and there would be a fair amount of goofing off, that would take place, as we were out there trying to have a good time and make the hours pass. So there may or may not have been some dirt clods thrown and stuff like that. But and sometimes he would hire another adult to be out there, I guess for a little bit of supervision. But kind of like I started talking in the last episode, there is a concept of efficiency even in weeding, and it's like how good of a job do you do and how much does it cost to do that, and sometimes the cost may outweigh the benefit. I mean, it's no different than applying chemical to a field. If you aren't going to receive any benefit, why would you go to the time and expense of applying it? So I think it's a similar principle here. But we were always told, pull them out by the roots. Well, I have one memory where we were out on a crew working on this, and before we headed out there, in this particular instance, we had some adult supervision, or whatever you call it, someone out there making sure we were staying on task and all that. And I remember she said, well, can you show us what weeds you want us to get and how you want us to take them out? And she may have asked it as much for her own self, but I'll never forget my uncle, seeing this big old weed or whatever, and so he takes a hack at it with the hoe, and he promptly chops the root right off. And so then he's trying to get it with his hands, and he wasn't able to get it. And he said, I think he made some comment, well, get the worst of it or whatever, something like that. And it's like, I tell you what, if he had pulled it out entirely by its root, he could have then probably said, I want every one of them done exactly like this. But when he tried to demonstrate, in front of his workers how to do it, and don't get me wrong, I'm not meaning to imply he was trying to be unreasonable or a jerk or anything like that at all. It was just kind of funny because I don't think it turned out quite the way he probably would have liked it to, right before his workers. So probably would have been better off just saying, yeah, get all the tall weeds, try to take them out by the roots, blah, blah, whatever. Instead, he kind of got put on the spot, and it didn't work out the best. But we still tried to take them out. And goodness knows, if you don't take it out by the root, it seems to come right on back. And we're out there irrigating, so with some regularity, and the water doesn't care which plant it goes to, and so you're really out there, you're irrigating all the weeds too while you're at it, which is kind of it's a maddening aspect of it, if you're not able to take out a weed, using chemicals or whatever, but just kind of the nature of the beast. So we'd go through whole fields of his strawberries or whatever, and I think once he got into the turf stuff, he was able to do more chemically, versus manually. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think that's kind of how it is. Once you don't have a consumable product coming off your field. So many hours spent in the sun wielding a hoe and trying to keep the good and only take the bad out. And I guess, it's like I said last time, there could be many life lessons. I know there are, around the concept of weeds and weeding, and although we didn't really think about any of those at that particular time in our life, but I've reflected on it many times since. It's kind of like problems in your life. If you can deal with them when they're small, much better off than having to deal with them when they become big and it's out of control, just like weeds. And occasionally, you could see that on a farm, when too much time had gone by before we were able to get out there and take care of the weeds, and it could really do a lot of damage, choking out the good stuff and making it hard to grow. Because if the weeds got too tall, they would shade. Just all those things you learn in science class, they would shade the plant and photosynthesis couldn't occur, and so the weed would flourish and the stuff you really wanted would slowly die. But anyway, that was weeding. Another thing, and I have some very fascinating uncles. Every single one of them is just a unique character, and this particular uncle was no different. And Oh, I guess I didn't bring that other tractor up. Oh well. Now we got the big field to do. This will keep us going for a while. But this one here, one memory I have of him is that he would invent words. And I have forgotten most of them now, I would say. But one that I do remember was do floppy. And it's like when he would be thinking of other things and trying to give his nephew some instructions, and maybe he had 10,000 things going through his mind all the same time, and maybe he couldn't think of what he was trying to say. So there was lots of things that ended up being called a doofloppy. You know, if it was the end of the pipe, you know, stick that pipe over there, grab the doofloppy and bring it down, and you know, you were just supposed to know what a doofloppy was. And there were several other terms, and I know, similar to our family, I know I am fond of nicknames. You know, all of our kids have nicknames. I hardly ever refer to them by their first name. You know, I guess to me it's just a term of endearment. You know, in terms of that, I know what their real name is, of course, but I know my uncle did that too. You know, so he had nicknames for his kids. Some of them not exactly flattering, I might add, but I'm pretty sure he probably had nicknames for us too out there in the field. Although I never asked about that. I know when I went to work in Lone Oak, then after this particular uncle, you know, there's two other uncles that owned Lone Oak Farms at the time. Actually, my grandfather was still involved too, come to think of it. But when I went up there, they used CB radios for communication, you know, between, I don't know, combine and truck and just around the farm or whatever. And you had to have a CB handle, and they figured rather than broadcasting, you know, your name over the airwaves, you know, where potentially other people could hear about it, and I don't know, you know, it probably wouldn't have been any big deal, but you know, just to prevent problems, I think they gave us all CB handles, or also known as nicknames. So there, I did know whatever nickname it was. I'm trying to remember what it was. Was it Boxcar? I think the first year I was up there, I was called Boxcar, and Boxcar came up a number of times in later years too. So I think that was the first one. I couldn't begin to tell you where it came from or why it was applied to me. I think at some point up there, you know, someone made a comment about something being small, and I don't remember just what they were referring to, but I think the analogy they used, it was, you know, smaller than, or if we do that, it's so small it's going to rattle around like BBs in a boxcar. Maybe that's where it came from. I don't remember. But one summer it was boxcar. Oop. Another summer it was Poindexter, and oops, don't drive into the fence. And I think that came from some movie or something we watched that summer. Nerds? Is that what it was? Yeah, I guess there was Nerds. Yeah, Poindexter. Anyways, I was Poindexter, and I seem to recall he had... yeah, my memory's failing. I don't know. I'm trying to remember that movie, which was excessively dumb, which is why we loved it, and adopted names from it. I think he was the four-eyed one. You know, he had Coke bottle glasses or whatever. At that time, I mean, I've always had terrible vision. And at that time, I think I had just gotten new contact lenses, and that was an experience in its own right. I practically felt naked when I got them things because I couldn't believe how well I could see, you know, which shows how bad it was for so long. Fortunately, never drove, you know, with that. Of course, I wouldn't have passed the eye exam. But anyway, maybe that's why I got the name Poindexter, is knowing that I just had new contact lenses. I don't know. Could be. I'm making it up as I go. And Then another year, and this one stuck for the longest time, I think, or was the one that I had most of all. I was called Roadrunner. And the reason was because I just ran everywhere. I mean, I used to be a runner. I was in track in school, even though I hated it. And on the farm, there was many times if you're out in the field and you're moving machinery around, sometimes, you need more pieces of machinery than you have people to move them around. So what I would do is literally run across the field from one side to the other. If there was a tractor over there that needed to be moved, or a truck or something. And I just got in the habit of doing it. And yeah, I was in clodhopper boots and pants and everything. It wasn't running attire, but I didn't care. It was just something that I did. And even on the farm, if we were out working on a machine or something, and maybe someone asked for, go get a 5/8 inch end wrench. And so it'd be over in the shop, in the toolbox or whatever, and it wasn't very far away. It might have been just 100 feet. But I didn't see any sense in walking when you could just run, So I would run over there. I don't know, I must have done it enough times that it amused them enough, they started just calling me Roadrunner. So that one I had for a long time. So anyways, I just say all that to say that I guess I've grown up in a family with lots of nicknames over the years. And I don't recall growing up, I think us siblings would throw nicknames at each other, of course, never flattering ones. It's mainly to pick on each other in brotherly love and kindness, of course. I don't recall my parents doing that, but definitely in my family, with my wife and I and our children, they have always had nicknames. And I guess all that to say that I guess I will understand, my uncle and nicknames, or coming up with terms for this, that, and the other. And I guess I do remember a nickname from my father, in terms of a wrench, the crescent wrench. And I remember him calling it the Oklahoma speed wrench or something like that. I think I was in high school before I learned what that was, that it was the same term, just some kind of term for the good old crescent wrench. The adjustable, the one that has an adjustable head on it, so you can fit different sizes of nuts and bolts. But anyway, on this uncle's farm, there was a good old doofloppy and various other terms, as he would invent them on the spot, and you had to be paying attention so that you knew what he was referring to. So learned some new words that have since been forgotten, except for that one. That one seems to have stuck. I haven't used it in my own personal life. That was only used there on the farm with him. So I'd be curious. We're no different from anyone else, so I can't imagine we're the only ones that have done such silly stuff with like nicknames and had pet names for tools and those kinds of things, or even vehicles. I know we've done that at home. I think I've talked about that on a previous episode, only who knows where. But I know we had that at Lono Farm too. The machinery and everything was generally named. Although, kind of named. You just talked about it in shorthand. There was I think it was a GMC pickup that they had, the Jimmy, they would call it. And then, obviously, yeah, the other combines, you had to be more specific as to which one. So you kind of just called them by their serial number or whatever they had on the side. Not their serial number, their model number. So maybe that doesn't qualify as a nickname. You know what? I think I'm going to take one more round. I think this will let me do it. That is 2 rounds in this field. I think I'm going to take a third before I start going back and forth. Oh, come on, keep going. I put you on my cruise control. maybe a little bit more on this mushroom plant. You know, mushrooms are an interesting thing. You know, this particular plant was there for many, many years. And eventually, you know, when I moved away from home and I got married, went to college, and then eventually I got a home next door to where I grew up. So it's the same neighborhood. And still to that day, the mushroom plant was down there. And our home is about, oh goodness, 4 miles from where this mushroom plant was located, 3. And I just remember have many memories as a kid when the wind was coming from the west, you could smell the mushroom plant. And generally it was an odor akin to manure. So we're not talking the best smelling stuff here. And I know it had to have degraded property values, you know, around it. You know, town was kind of coming east, you know, doing what it does, the old urban sprawl and growing larger. And of course, they pick all this beautiful farmland, flat land, and they go over the top of it because it's easy to build. You know, in some ways, I hate that dynamic, and it's just a shame that farmland gets taken out of production like that. But that's a rant for another time. But as it did that, and it was mainly suburban homes, you know, so people were living in and around this mushroom plant, and the plant took up, oh boy, is maybe 100 acres, and houses were definitely on the south of it and on the west of it, and then I think there was some on the north, not as many. There's many more now. And kind of on the far eastern side where the plant was, you know, the town city limit has kind of held its line, and there hasn't been further encroachment into the country, you know, where farming takes place. But the point is, there was a lot of people around, and this stuff was so smelly. You know, there had been tons of complaints, I'm sure, by all the people around. And one of the things my brother and I discovered is we were, you know, because we were roaming around this place on our bikes because we were changing irrigation pipe for my uncle, and so we had to be in there, you know, which is kind of another thing. I mean, 2 small boys roaming around all this heavy machinery where 2 kids have no right to be. Nobody ever stopped us that I can recall, which is kind of pretty remarkable. So my uncle must have told them, you know, to be on the lookout for us. But one of the things we discovered is around the entire property, and we're talking 100 acres, so it's a lot of pipe. We found a pipe kind of buried, not really buried, it was down at ground level, kind of in the grass, so grass had grown around it, and the pipe had holes in it, these little holes kind of all over in it, and my brother and I, we could tell it was putting out air, and it smelled like mint. And of course, that's exactly what it was. And we made the mistake of leaning down and getting a good whiff of it, and about knocks you on your butt, you know, because it was so potent, it's so concentrated. But I think to deal with all the complaints and to try to be good neighbors, the mushroom plant attempted to have some mint air put out to counteract all the nasty air, if you will. And honestly, I really don't think it was all that effective at all. But I give him props for attempting, you know, trying at least. Because it still smelled, you know, quite badly around there. Unless you were directly inhaling off the... Oh, I probably didn't. Let me see here. Get over about where the crest of the hill is. And let me see here. Of course, I got this tree in the way. That doesn't help. Yeah, that's about right. Except I need to have the doggone thing down. Here we go. Try to start going back and forth now in our big field. So it was kind of interesting seeing that, and I think at some point my brother and I located the area where there was this massive, I guess it's a type of pump, that would send all the air through the lines. It required quite a setup. And we found, where they were putting the mint. There's the bell. Found the area where they were putting in the mint oil, and it was just highly concentrated. And actually, in the area where I live, they do farm mint. Some guys do. I mean, that'd be an interesting crop to bring to Farming Simulator 2. I know last episode I mentioned something I've never seen in Farming Sim, is sod farming or nursery stock. And you know what? I've never seen mint farming either. I've seen lots of other things, but I haven't seen those. So it was an interesting way to get high if you were so inclined, but I do not recommend it. Concentrated mint is, well, it was devastating to my nose at least. So we only did that once. But it was just interesting what they did to try to, work with the community. Anyway, we have reached the end of this episode, and I'm almost out of seed, which I'll try to do off cam. So thank you so much for coming along and enjoying Gelvin Valley with me. I hope you all are having a wonderful day. I will see you on the next one. Goodbye.